Hello.
Hey, hey,
Hi,
hello.
hi, Arthur. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. And you?
Thank you so much. It's great to see you at the PA Talks.
Oh, my pleasure. Really, it's an honor to be on your platform.
Thank you so much. We should have done this interview a couple of years ago, but we were a little bit sorry for that.
It's better late than never, and I'm really happy to address the community. And you have done an amazing job in spreading the parametric love.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. You're in the office right now?
I am, yeah. I'm in our office in East London, and we're coming back slowly after the whole COVID thing. So I'm really happy to. I love the office atmosphere. So I was struggling to be working at home. So yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Awesome. Love it. Love it. So, before going to introduction and also starting the conversation, I just wanted to mention everybody, if you have any questions, please write them in the question box down below. So I will be exploring the questions section during the talk. So if you have any question to ask from Arthur, just write them in the question box. I will be reading them to dear Arthur. So Arthur, to those, it's really it's really hard to not hear your name on social media, on these magazines, digital magazines, and not to see your works. But in case for those of you, those of the people, for those of our audience who don't know you, can you give a little bit of your a little bit of introduction and briefly introduce yourself and also your story of becoming an architect?
Yeah, so I'm French, in case you cannot recognize the accent, and I'm a and I studied here in London at the Architectural Association, which is a fantastic school, where I learned parametric design. In a way, at the time, I don't know if we even had a word for it. It was the similar year as Ahim Menges and Neri Oxman. They were about to graduate when I arrived, so you can imagine the excitement at the time. And then
Absolutely.
I worked for Zahedid Architect. It seemed to be the normal way to go to get to know this community. And then I worked in a less known practice called Proctor and Matthews on a giant zoo, a sort of giant dome, an ecosystem. And I really enjoyed this relationship between nature and architecture and how we can have a sort of a role to play as a node into something bigger, an ecosystem. And it made me
Yes.
think a lot. And then I started also being a bit geeky and doing my own 3D printers. And I was asked to teach. And I think the teaching aspect of what I do or what we do now as a group is really key to how I developed as an architect and beyond that as a human being. And so then just jumped and decided to do my own company, really, because people had an interest in the teaching and how digital fabrication could change the role of an architect. And so that's how I started, and that's my background.
Yes, amazing. When did your interest emerge with the parametric and computational design?
So I was always interested in coding, and my father is a computer scientist, and and I learned code. I'm sure you probably did as well. We had this Macintosh, this old Apple, and we were learning to code on things like
Yes.
logo, like the little turtle. And I was fascinated by the ideas of forms that can emerge from a set of rules. And it was something that I thought was really re-questioning the way we were taught architecture, because we're always told about the architect with his pen doing some genius sketch, and then and whatever happens. But instead, I saw the little turtle doing little things in space, and so when I noticed that parametric architecture and generative designs were sort of linked, and that you could develop it to create.
Arthur, do you hear me?
Yeah. Did I lose you for a while?
Okay, I think there was a problem in connection. No worries, just you can continue.
No problem. I was saying that as soon as I discovered that you can have a scientific method to create, which I think is the key to parametric architecture, then that's how I realized the potential, let's just say.
Amazing, love it. You're passionate about technology and new design tools, also building the business model of your office around that is quite admirable. also, this makes your interests to stretch far beyond the typical boundaries of architecture. Can you tell us how did you start at your office, and also how did you build the business plan around these new emerging technologies in architecture?
So strangely enough, I didn't want to set up an architecture firm. Like I wanted to create a fabrication space, almost like a fab lab, where people could come and use machines and be part of the design process through changing parameters. So I thought by doing parametric design, one could set rules and then people could interact with these rules. So I thought there was a democratic aspect to parametric design. And so I registered a company online called People's Atelier, the atelier of the people. And then I quickly realized the English people couldn't spell that. And a friend of mine, you know, had a pub in East London, and he said, well, why don't you just like come and do your atelier there? And so I changed it to FabPub.
FabPub.
Yeah, FabPub, exactly. And people would say, oh, but I don't know how to use these machines. Can you help me? Can you? And then so I started doing freelancing. And slowly with, I guess, the project taking shape, I developed a language, I guess, of my own. And so it became a consistent language that kept on coming back. And I thought, well, I better have a company for the more artistic, personal touch. And so that's how MamouMani Limited developed itself. But it wasn't the intention. It just happened as a sort of natural, personal touch in parallel to this democratic ambition.
Yeah, amazing. So you also, what exactly do you do in FabPub?
So upstairs here, we have 2 floors, and maybe I'll have a chance to show you. Downstairs is FabPub. It's basically open to all. People can book machines. They go online. We have an app where people can like book for a certain amount of hours. Or we have giant laser cutters, we have 3D printers, we have all the latest technology that people can just access. So the community comes around. Then we have businesses that come and ask us to do, I don't know, it could be anything from a giant figurine, or it's really, we have the craziest, amazing emails, really. Every day it's a pleasure to see. And then upstairs we have our architecture studio, and sometimes the 2 companies work together. So very often we design something that requires FabPub to deliver. Sometimes we design something separately from it. Sometimes we do parametric consultancy, and sometimes we teach. And so it's really more than a company, it's an ecosystem. Ecosystem yes. of people, ecosystem of companies, and just a group of people that love what they're doing and just came together, really. That's what we are.
So you also get the projects, the fabrication projects of the fabrication process of the projects that you don't design. For example, the FabPub yeah. is just related to that part as well.
Yeah, I thought it was important not to scare people off. I know that, you know, architects, we have big egos, you know, we want to have a signature, and me included. And I thought it was very important to separate the personal artistic adventure, which every architect is entitled to have, really, from the public, the interaction with others and the empowerment. And I thought that it was important to have a space that is free of me. And yeah. so FabPub receives any architects, artists, people that want to use the technology that we develop, you know, the plugins on Grasshopper, the blends of material, all these things that are really just a result of our research is accessible to others. And for me, that was a really important aspect. And also local fabrication. You know, let's say we have a project in the US. We are really keen to have spaces like this in the US. So we send machines and we try to make sure we have what we call distributed manufacturing. And so that's a really, really important aspect of the environmental. Like all of this technology really is here to have an environmental approach. And so local manufacturing, etc., is super important. And so we, you know, we still have our architecture project, as you can see on my Instagram. It's full yes. of that. But we try to work closely with FabPub, and FabPub works with everyone. So that's how it works here.
Yeah, amazing. Talking about your projects, Galaxia is one of the best examples of bringing parametric architecture to life in a real scale. The temple is a spiraling wooden pavilion that was the main temple in the Burning Man Festival 2018 at the Black Rock City Desert. And after that, it just got set to fire. So can you talk about the design process of this project? And I know that you won a competition for that and did a fundraiser. Can you talk a little bit about these processes?
Yeah, of course. I'm looking for my little model because I always have Galaxias around me, because obviously we had to not only design it, build it, but also fundraise for it. So it was really, and I got married in there. So it was a big holistic journey, I would say.
Yes.
And so, of course, it's beyond just a competition. In fact, I don't think Burning Man would want to see it as a design competition. I was going to Burning Man with my students because I was teaching at University of Westminster, and every year we would go there to build things, to learn not just architecture, but all the principles behind Burning Man. There's many. There's 10 principles: radical self-reliance, radical inclusion, leave no trace, really interesting concepts that are linked to things like Buckminster Fuller or the Californian ideology. So it's a very deep, interesting place. And so I was going every year, really enjoying learning to build things that are, where you have no choice but to deliver in a week, and there's no, quote unquote excuse to ask another contractor.
Yes.
And so it was an amazing thing for the students, and me included. And we did this blog, We Want to Learn, because I was learning as much as them. Like and then so slowly started developing this relationship with the community of Burning Man. And then we did this project called Tangential Dreams, which was involving people in the process. People could write their dreams on the structure. And at that time, I noticed the temple, which was a place where you see spirituality, but without a specific religion. All religions were welcome. Every human being was welcome. And everyone would put offerings in there, or, and so when I saw this, I was just so moved. I come from a mixed background, I don't have a set religion. And so I always thought, what about people like me that need to relate to something higher, right? Something spiritual.
Yes.
And so I was really impressed that a space like this could exist, a secular spirituality. And so that I find was really, really inspiring. And I love, and we'll talk maybe about Iranian architecture. I love that humans have this higher purpose and have a type of architecture that can connect and that can call for your higher higher sort of there's no word for it, right?
Yes.
So and so I just really wanted to propose something for the Burning Man temple. And when they opened up the quote unquote competition, the tender to other people, this year the theme of Burning Man, because every year you have a theme, and that year was I, Robot, the book of Isaac Asimov. I don't know if you know.
Yes, I know Asimov.
Yeah, perfect. He wrote the Foundation series. He wrote I, Robot. And then in the Foundation series, he talks about this planet called Gaia, which is part of a big galaxy called Galaxia, and where every single item is connected. Whether you're a human, a stone, a piece of, I don't know, nature, everything is interconnected. There's no individual. It's all one big network. And it's called Galaxia. And I thought, well, it's a perfect moment to talk about everything that I think is interesting: robotics versus spirituality, humans versus machines. You see, it was just like everything that I thought could work into a piece of architecture that represents our age. And it sounds grand, but I just thought that's it. And I happen to have worked on a project for Virgin Galactic, which was a little bit like that, which basically was an inverted dome generated by that turtle we were talking about, using things like hoop snake on Grasshopper recursion. And so we suggested that version, just a little bit Burning Man tweaked, with timber, etc., etc.
Yes.
And that's Galaxia.
Yeah, and also about the idea of building something and then burning it. How does it feel?
The Tibetan monks that they spend a lot of time on these mandalas, and then at the end they blow them out.
Yes.
It's a similar feeling, I
Same,
think.
same.
It's the same philosophy. I think it's the idea that nothing is permanent, nothing, and it's hard to accept, right? Especially architects, we are being taught about the Parthenon, in Athens, and the ruins forever, and I think it's something that's a strange concept for us as architects, but I find fascinating. And so we did this as part of a ritual to burn the project. And the moment we burnt it was a big relief for me. You have to imagine we had to raise about $600,000. We have to have a structure that's 60 meters wide, 20 meters high, built by volunteers, unskilled volunteers
Yes.
showing up. We used really cheap things like ratchet straps and we built it in 18 days. And so, it's a lot of
That's
stress.
a lot of tough work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of stress, and it takes a toll on personal life and everything. So it's not an easy feat. And so to burn it felt quite nice. And also
Awesome.
we designed, we designed it knowing we were going to burn it. So that it's a fully open structure. It doesn't have any roof. It's we used actually very little amount of material, less
Yes.
than foam, in terms of density. So it felt right.
Amazing.
Not that I want to
Amazing.
burn structures, but this time it felt good. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to talk about the project that you did with Chris as well, Chris Precht. Chris was in the show as well. Like we did PA 6 with Chris Precht. We met in Istanbul. And about the project, the Sandwave project that you did together in Saudi Arabia. Can you talk about that project as well?
Yeah, it's a special project because it was just before COVID. And it's really the last kind of big adventure we went into before the world shut down. And I love Chris, like on a deeply personal level, like I connect, and I'm sure you all do. Like he's just such a human being.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's really refreshing, I find, to see people that speak about more than just architecture. He speaks about topics that resonate. And I think architects have a tendency to sometimes, stay within architecture, think that we have to speak the language of architect. We develop weird languages, as architects. And I just like the way that he reconnects the general public to our profession. And I think it's super important. There's that stat that says that only 5% of all the buildings in the world are made by architects. I think with the modernist movement, we lost a little bit our relatability. I think people maybe lost a bit of trust in us. And I think the purpose that we should be looking for is to explain to people why we are relevant. And I think he does that so well, like uniquely well. And we met. He invited me for a crit. He teaches at Münster University in Austria, I think. And we went there and we had a blast. Like we just I really enjoyed his modular approach. I gave a talk to his students, and he really understood our approach. And so I guess it was just natural that we would work together.
Amazing.
And he had, he had a baby, and at the time his wife was pregnant, and I think he got approached for this project, and he thought, rather than hire a massive team and all these things, like why not collaborate with architects that have a team that can help deliver? I think that's what he's thinking.
Yes,
and
good mentality. Good idea.
Yeah, and really, generous. Like just, often architects were like, it's kind of. Like it's hard to the concept of collaboration can seem a bit like
architects don't give jobs to other architects.
Yeah, right. well, in this case, Chris did.
Yes, and, Chris did. Broke that tradition.
Exactly. And to be honest, I would be so happy to do this again. And I already suggested to him a few options, and I think we just had it just has to align, right? And things align, then it's all natural. And it felt natural, and we really enjoyed it. And obviously it's Saudi Arabia, and we are very keen on environmental design. So we talked a lot. We were like, does this feel right or wrong? Or should we do it? Should we not? And we said we would do it only if it would try to find alternative solutions that can help get away from oil, get away from the petroleum business, get away from this mentality of carbon. And so we talked about using the most present material there, sand, and the client was just excited. And so, you know, us with excitement, we were on.
Amazing.
That's it.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. What exactly is eco-parametric architecture?
So it's pretty straightforward to some extent. Parametric design, you're all familiar with it. It's when you use parameters to define a form. But I find that with this idea of parametric design came a obsession with form. An obsession, I mean, Patrick Schumacher talks about style, for example, the idea that there is a parametric style. I agree that the general public see now the parametric style, and parametric architecture platform, the one that you started, is really a sign of the popularity of this movement. However, I think that there is a real connection with nature that parametric design enables. In fact, I think we reproduce natural behaviors in the computer. And I find this a beautiful paradox of parametric design, that it brings us closer to nature. And so I guess just adding the word eco in front just kind of reminds us of ecology and ecosystems and things that brings us back to nature. And so that's what I think is eco-parametric. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I know you have a deep interest about Iranian architecture and especially Mogarnas techniques, which was built by famous architects hundreds of years ago in Iranian architecture. Can you tell us what unique aspects do you see in Iranian architecture that inspires you?
It's a lovely question. I'm, you know, you probably realize through Galaxia that I love spirituality. I think that sometimes humans are after something beyond the material, beyond the common, and that's what makes humans beautiful, I think. And that aspiration to connect with other humans through geometry, because that's what we do, yes, is very core to the development of our profession as architects. In fact, there is this really nice book, Homo Sapiens by Harari, that says that civilization started when we built a temple. And I think Iran has a beautiful illustration of that. The Muqarnas, which, you know, symbolizes the grotto, where, you know, obviously the prophet was revealed, like the word of God. It was something that was really a metaphor of a higher purpose, right? And so there was something really interesting in the symbology of that geometry in relation to that higher purpose. It has a deep meaning to it that everyone related. And so there is something that I find fascinating when simple geometry can acquire another meaning that helps connect people in general, you know. And obviously, you know, I come from a different background, but I can really relate to that. And so you know, I look forward to be able to see it in person, but
hopefully one day.
Yeah, you know, I told you that story one day that when I was studying at the Architectural Association, when I graduated, I did my diploma on the architect Oscar Niemeyer. And the brief, he was about 100 years old at the time. And I was starting to do like a new facade for one of his buildings, taking into account, you know, the sun, the sunlight, et cetera, et cetera. And then Hanif Kara from AKT was part of the jury. Yes. And he told me, like, Arthur, you talk about parametric design as if it's so new, but why don't you look at, you know, the Islamic patterns and the different symmetry groups and the understanding of all these things. And I was just like, oh yeah, it's very humbling to know. And, you know, you probably see me reading millions of books, but it's really humbling to know that what we're doing now is just a continuation of a long trail, you know, of people and of attempts to deal with geometry and to create systems with geometry. And I really think we shouldn't disconnect ourselves from the past at all. And in fact, you know, to research symmetry groups and to research these things will be the first thing we'll do in our workship for the Parametric Studio.
Parametric Studio. Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yesterday, not yesterday, a couple of hours ago, you published a story about Buckminster Fuller, and you just shared a paragraph, highlighted a paragraph. Can you talk about that paragraph as well? Why it was inspiring for you?
You know, Buckminster Fuller, to me, is a little bit like the Da Vinci of the 20th century. Like, he's not specifically an architect. He's not specifically an engineer. He's you know, he's everything. He's an inventor. He's a thinker. He plays with words.
Let me read it. Let me read it.
Okay.
It says the proper activity of the architect engineer is purposeful. It is not to devise a better society so as to arrive to a finer architecture. It is to provide a better architecture in order to arrive at the more desirable society. Yeah, amazing code. Amazing code. Yeah. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. You know, I find that often we think we're powerless. We often think that, you know, because the system is a certain way, our impact locally, ourselves, is very minimal. And I love Buckminster Fuller because he knows that one person can have a huge impact and make a huge difference. And he says it in that quote. And I encourage everyone to think that your impact, wherever you are, whoever you are, is huge. And I think Buckminster Fuller is so good at proving that. And yeah, and then he is also just an inspiring person because he sees beyond our world. Remember when I mentioned about Chris Presch?
Yes.
Like, I think he's a little bit like that. I think he thinks beyond his own perspective. He tries to connect and explain things. And Buckminster Fuller was a great educator. He had I think it's called the Black House Mountain School, where John Cage, the jazzman, Ruth Azawa, the artist, they would all connect a little bit like the Bauhaus to explore holistic ways of creating. And so I find this is a really inspiring passage in an inspiring book.
Yes, amazing. I really loved it. Absolutely.
Cool.
What do you think about the expansion of architecture towards robotics and 3D printings? And when we can see a solid, livable example of a complete 3D printed project? So I know there are a lot of projects right now, and there are many prototypes, research projects, but they are not livable yet. They are not in the scale that, okay, now I can 3D print my own house and now I can live there. What do you think, how far we are with that, from that future?
It's a very good question. You know, one could even question the idea of 3D printing the entire house, because, you know, 3D printing is like putting this layer of material, like a toothpaste around.
Yes.
And this works really well for vertical structures, but not very well for flat surface. And, you know, roofs are flat surface to some extent. So, you know, it raises question: do we want to 3D print an entire building? Does that even make sense? It would make sense if we wanted to live in a structure like Gaudi's structure that are entirely compressive, for example.
Absolutely.
And if that's the case, if we want to, then we can do it already. The question is, you know, which client, which site, which material? I think we're really not that far. Like, we're exploring a few projects. I can't mention too many projects because, you know, NDAs and all that. But if you look at WASP, you know, WASP, the 3D printing company in Bologna, who we are representing in the UK with FabPub, they've developed Tekla, which you published onto your Parametric Architecture platform, and they use Earth. Now, Earth, about 3 billion people in the world live in Earth building. People don't know that, but it's the most common material for housing. And we don't know because in our cities, we don't see many Earth buildings, right? But when you start thinking that Earth is probably the least amount of carbon being used, right? Way better than concrete, not even comparable. And it can go back to the Earth, right? It raises questions, because then we could take the Earth from the ground and we could print the villages based on forms that are inspired by Gaudi, in that they would be catenary domes and stuff like that. We could interlink them and think of machines that can interlink them, just like WASP has done. And then this becomes very real. Now, but it raises the question, well, what about the windows? What about the reinforcement? You know that in Iran, for example, there was an earthquake that destroyed Bam, the city of Bam.
Yes.
And it's very dangerous on the earth. You need steel or some kind of reinforcement like wood. You're obviously not going to print that. Or you change the head of the printer and you start printing in bioplastics to create tension. So we need to think multi-material. We need to think of assembly sequences, and beyond the single machine maybe doing everything. I don't know, maybe not, but then the single machine needs different heads. So at some point or another, we need to switch from mono-material to multi-material, to different arrangement, to different sequences, to different axes, because a printer can only print from the top down or from the bottom up, but not the undercuts. So what happened to the secondary robots that come in? So it's a choreography, which forces us to think with time in mind. And architects don't do that. They have a final image, but they don't have the sequence. And so that's something I learned at Burning Man. You need to think sequence because you're building it. But architects don't build their projects. We're not used to that phase where you make the architecture. You kind of send your design to a contractor. So I think architects need to build their own buildings before anything, before thinking 3D printing. They need to be on site. They need to learn from carpenters. They need to learn from metal workers, because otherwise you're just going to think, I'm going to press a button and the thing's going to print. But it's much more complex than that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, my next question is related to this one as well. Architecture is kind of rocket science, and it's a tough profession. And because for creating a good architecture, a good building, it has to be collaborations or involving other disciplines inside it. And without this collaboration, it would never be possible to generate or create such complex forms or structures. How do you think parametric tools helped in this collaboration process with other disciplines?
It's a great question, because it's very true. I've been teaching Grasshopper for, I don't know, 10, 12 years now. And every class has a shoe designer, a jewelry designer, an engineer, an MEP engineer, you name it.
And they are studying architecture.
No, they're just doing jewelry. And I mean, some of them might want to shift to architecture because they're being exposed to it. But I was told to do workshops with car designers. Like I did a workshop at McLaren Racing. And every time the topics are similar, whether it's genetic algorithms, whether it's bending moments using Caramba, whether it's sunlight analysis using Ladybug or Honeybee, or all these plugins from the amazing community, or 3D printing with Silkworm. And I noticed that because people get familiar with code, and code is a universal language, it breaks boundaries because we end up speaking the same language. Whereas before you had a drawing, you had a specific code, a specific ways of doing architecture that wasn't relatable to other professions. You know, a car designer might not do their cars on AutoCAD, but they might use parametric design to do something that's just not accessible in their own tools. And so it has broken boundaries. And even in our world, like we were helping, for example, we did a 3D printing food project where we were printing the menu. And they came to us because we knew G-code because of Silkworm. And so it was just like, oh, that's weird. And everyone was like, Arthur, you're crazy. Like, why are you doing like food? And you know, like parents or colleagues, or they were like, yeah, he's not an architect. Yeah, that's not architecture. And I'm like, yeah, well, you know, read Buckminster Fuller. You know, he's designed maps. Like it was not, he didn't need a label. We don't need labels, you know, as long as what you create is relevant.
Absolutely. Amazing. Love it. And is there any other architects that, other than Chris, inspires you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously, Oscar Niemeyer, I just love the way he brings you to his personal world. You know, I love people that bring you to their world, and the way he talks about the mountains of his country. Um, any architects that manage to bring poetry or art or something that is deeply personal, you know, obviously when Gary speaks about how he was playing with fish, you know, in the water, and now how the shapes are forming parts of his world in that sense, I really find inspiring. And I also love the sort of more geeky but interesting approach of, say, Toyo Ito, where everything is extremely creative solutions to a problem, which I think architects are very good at because we think outside the box. So yeah.
Amazing, amazing, love it. So you decided to join us at the Academy to have your educational studio running with the name of studio Mamou-Mani. We'll have our first studio starting in less than 10 days. What can you tell us about this studio and about its features? What will students learn in this studio?
So it will be a really global class. It's not just parametric design in a way. I'm not just going to teach software with the team. What we want is to teach an approach, a way of seeing the world, a way of creating business models, not just the software, but the consequence of that software. Parametric design helps letting go. It helps iterate. It helps create in a similar way to how nature creates. And we're going to see that. I'm going to teach you, obviously, the tools. My colleagues are going to teach you the tools. But we're going to give you, beyond that, lectures on how it influenced us, how it makes us create the things we create and why, and the technologies that are involved in understanding this. I mean, I'll take, for example, the wooden wave, you know, like we worked on a pattern that influenced wood, or on Galaxia, or, you know, we use all the time material properties and we try and create mechanism. And you probably saw the playlist by now of on YouTube that I created with ecoparametric mathematics, symmetry groups, you know, ancestral designs, patterns, vectors, complex numbers. I'm very keen for this to be a lab of knowledge and to share and to create projects. And I'll ask the students to, of course, do a bit of homework and to develop their own project, because I think that's how I learned. I learned through being involved, through doing my own things. And so you're going to be asked to do a bit of homework. But I think this will be really, really beautiful because you'll develop a piece of portfolio that's unique.
Yeah, amazing. Actually, we have a lot of registrations from big architecture offices like 3XN.
Nice.
That's a good opportunity as well. So, Arthur, what do you think about our platform, PA?
Look, I love it. Like I told you, I was so honored that you contacted me because I feel like you do exactly what I was talking, which is to reconnect people with architecture. And it's amazing that, you know, such a, I don't want to say geeky, but a term like parametric, it's just so weird. Like, what is parametric? What? And people are like, oh, it's never going to be like, you know, modernism or, but actually it is. It's really powerful. People love parametric design. They love it. Like, you know, they love it when your friends that have nothing to do with the architectural world come and say, oh, look at this parametric building. You know, or my wife, she's like, hey, look, that's a parametric thing. And she understands because it's now obvious that some shapes are parametric. It's weird to explain it, but I really enjoy that because I feel like if people relate, then they will reconnect with us and we will be able to talk to them in a language they understand. And everyone walks in nature and loves flowers. And I think that's why people love parametric design. It's soft, it's engaging, it's reassuring, it's warm, and it's everything that modernism was not.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, the time that we started this platform, there was no certain focus of like a gallery of the projects to show what is the best example of parametric design or parametric architecture. And what I tried to do was create a library of the best parametric works to showcase what is actually parametric design and parametric architecture. That was our end goal.
Nice.
Thank you. And lastly, you have lectured widely in many universities, AA, Westminster, and taught your architecture style and methodologies around computational and parametric design as well. With all these experiences, what kind of advice would you like to share with young professionals around the world?
I think it's a very, very exciting time. I know that it's hard because of COVID, and it's going to be probably an economical crisis, and there's going to be challenge, but any crisis has amazing opportunities. I graduated in 2008, same year as the global crash, obviously. But because I was interested in thinking differently in that sense, and I wasn't letting other people tell me what's architecture and what's not, through, role figures like Buckminster Fuller, for example, and others, I just knew that there was some future in what I was doing. And I can tell you there's a lot of future in parametric design, in digital fabrication. And I think there is space for everyone to be part of this revolution. And I really strongly encourage people to not dismiss it as something that is just technical, or that is just something that is mundane, and and we need to move on, because architect has a tendency to always move on to the next thing.
Absolutely.
and so I just think there is mileage to learn all these things, to learn coding, to learn parametric design. It's a very broad science, like, the amount of plugins there are on Grasshopper. I would love one day to just explore all of them. There's just so much to learn. And that desire to learn, that curiosity, I think is what helped me go out of the box and defined our niche, which made our office what it is. And so I strongly encourage people to be curious and to seek out elsewhere.
Yeah, amazing. Love it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Arthur. Unfortunately, my phone didn't just load to show the pictures of the project, and I can now see the questions in the question box actually. But thank you so much for joining to this live session on PA Talks 37. It was really an inspiring talk, and I really appreciate your time. Do you have any final words to add to this conversation?
Me or the people?
Yes, you.
Oh, look, I was looking at the messages of everyone, and they ask many, many questions on things like VR and things, like.
Yeah, my phone is just hanged, and it's just freezed in the comments. If you can see the comments, please answer any of them if you want.
So one of them says, "How are you?" Some of them say, "Why did they burn it?" Things like that. I guess or someone says, "I like to be a famous designer." I'm looking now at everyone. I mean, it's nice to. Do you think that the deep programming language that architects can learn and go inside make them lose the sense of space related to humanity? Wow, that is a good question.
So deep question.
A very deep question, and I really think actually there is a real interesting paradox that we are discovering, which is that the more we go into the codes, the more we understand the inner codes of things. You probably saw the Matrix, right? Like,
yes.
I really think that architects are being asked a bit too much sometimes. And I think that's the consequence of the previous geniuses, the Renaissance geniuses. We were always the figure that needs to solve all the problems, and somehow it's going to come from our brain as the genius idea. And I really don't believe in that, as you can imagine. I think that genius comes a brick at a time, one brick at a time, made of many geniuses. We have a big team here, and like, I really don't believe in the one genius or the one solution. I believe that there are many, many different iterations that needs to be made, and we need to know that there might be some elements of good, some elements of bad in each solutions. And we just need to have an honest debate about it. I really think that beauty is universal, and that you can find it if you have the things in front of you. I find it very hard to take a decision unless it's in front of me. And so that's why I think being able to iterate fast and having many versions, it's one of the many beautiful things about parametric tools. You can iterate and you can let the computer help you as well. And you're developing systems, not final forms. And so I feel in that sense, they're actually deeply connected to our inner nature, and therefore deeply human as well, because I think humans are nature anyways.
Yes, amazing, amazing, love it. Do you see any other questions?
I'm seeing a lot of hello from Indonesia, from Uzbekistan, from Belarus, from Iran. What is the best 3D program for parametric design? Obviously, you know what I'm going to say, Grasshopper for Rhino, obviously. I'm experimenting on different things. I've been looking at XGen for Katia. I've been looking at different plugins. I think the beauty of Grasshopper is still the fact that it's a community, and that it's people like you and me that share things online in Food for Rhino. You probably know it, foodforrhino.com.
Yes.
People share plugins, and there's something just so generous about it. I remember when we did Silkworm with my friend Adam, we just started that, put it online, and people started using it. And we saw downloads from MIT, and we got so excited. But it was just a pleasure. We were just enjoying ourselves and enjoying sharing. And then someone liked it, and WASP liked it, and sent us a printer. And so when you give, things happen, and it's the beauty of giving and being generous. I think it's a kind of economy, a parallel economy of gift, which I strongly recommend you get into.
Yes, amazing, amazing. What is your idea about Revit now? I see comments in my computer screen.
Good.
So do you want to continue with the comments question?
Yeah, it's nice. No, I love it.
Yes,
I'm seeing a few things. Yeah, go for it. If you find something before me, I'm scrolling. I'm seeing a lot of really interesting things. For the books, you guys don't hesitate to see. I think it's in my story. I put the cover of the book. It's called 9 Chains to the Moon. That's the book. But I think the main book of Buckminster Fuller is Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. That is the Bible of Buckminster Fuller, where he describes his idea of the generalist versus the specialist. He believes in generalists, not in specialists, for example, and that's a really, really important notion. Yeah, so that's that.
Amazing. And there's one question. What do you think about Dynamo Revit?
Yeah, so I'm not so familiar with Revit and the Revit world. I'm more ArchiCAD. I'll just be honest. I just prefer Graphisoft as a company. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but I just love their support, and I love the spirit, and I like software that innovate and that constantly respond to their users. And I love the link between Grasshopper and ArchiCAD. I think it's really impressive. It's like it's live. It's like so. I don't know if I'm supposed to say all these things, but I'll just say them. So
okay,
yeah.
cool.
Here you go. I said it.
No worries. So what inspired you to become an architect? You answered already that one. So which one is more important for an architect, talent or computational skills? Both.
Wow. Yeah. What do you think, Hamid?
I think both. It's not just computation. Architecture is there is there's kind of like the things that you see as a building or something landscape, but they are not architecture. They are buildings. And to connect that with the human, you need to do something around like connecting the feeling or connecting the spirituality of the building with the human. So that's what I call architecture. A good architecture connects with the feeling of the human, like a feeling of being at home, or a good design, or safe. These are the feelings, and architecture is also one of these aspects that human kind is related to. And to connect your architectural talent, you need to develop those talents to do computational design with your own taste, with your own artistic or with your own methodologies. That's computational design is the skill and also or a tool, and connecting with your artistic thoughts, it makes it architecture. Yeah, general idea.
What was the in the question? They said, should I be good at computational design or should I be good at? What was the other alternative?
Let me find it. Which one is most important for an architect, talent or computational skills?
Wow, that's you know, it's a big question, because what is talent, yes, right? Like, you know, it's very hard to say. It's because talent is one of those things, it's hard to define, and you need to grow it. And I completely agree with you, Hamid.
Yes.
And I think we're actually, strangely enough, we're not encouraged as architects to get out, to do a sport, to do another activity, to connect with other humans that are not architects. We're Absolutely. Often like in our little bubbles, reading architects, and I read a lot of books, and I really love learning about other things. And, you know, I try to connect with people that are as curious as possible. And I think that's really important. And like you said, Hamid, if you're going to connect with other human, then connect with other human, not Absolutely. Just with architecture. And so, yeah, I find also a soft skill that I really, by teaching, I think I'm also able to relate to people a bit better than if I wasn't doing that. So I recommend teaching as well as a way to learn generosity, and that's a very important skill, I think. Yeah.
Yes. And one final question: what universities do you currently teach as faculty?
At the moment, University of Westminster and YAC in Barcelona. So yes. These are the two ones that I'm teaching at, and obviously now the studio yes. of PA Academy. So, but yeah, those are the two universities that I'm actually officially faculty.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. And also, I just want to say thank you to Stephen Chilton, who's watching us right now.
Hey,
he sent
hello.
a lot of regards.
Nice.
Thank you so
this is
much.
Lovely.
Appreciate your time, Arturo. Do you have anything to add?
No, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Hamid. I really, really appreciate this and the opportunity you gave us to do this eco-parametric structure workshop, because I feel like this is, you have to be quite open-minded to accept Absolutely. The weird thoughts we have, you know, yes. And I think you're a very open-minded person, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a nice day, Arthur.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Hamid. Bye-bye.
Bye.